That's right. Look, I'm not gonna say I told you so, but I told you so. See, now I had to go and get comfortable because you gotta be comfortable when you're right. Alright, so thank you all for coming again to another episode of Getting Caught Up. I'm upcoming author. Anyway, so what am I talking about? I am talking about this. I am talking about The Hunger Games, a ballad of songbirds and snakes. I actually just finished it last night, and I have a few thoughts. So let me preface it with this. I have only read The Hunger Games, all 3 books, once, and I've only seen all the movies once. And that was right before the first movie came out. That being said, I love the series. I read it voraciously when I first got the series. I bought the 3-pack. It was maybe 2 weeks before the movie came out. I read book 1 and book 2 before the first movie came out. Read book 3, and it was just like, oh my gosh, so excited, right? So, of course, I wanted to go ahead and read the prequel, which is the ballad. Now, in that, this comment right here is from my sister Justice, and she and I were talking a lot about this book. And what we talked about was the fact that I wasn't seeing what was being promised. And what was being promised? We were promised that we were going to get the whole entire backstory into President Snow that would tell us exactly how he became President Snow. But at the time I did my video at the beginning of this month, which was a recap of what I read and where I was at in Ballad, I mentioned the fact that I wasn't seeing President Snow. What I was seeing was a scared little boy who had PTSD from a terrible war that his side won, and was wrestling with some of the issues that came along with being the victors. So here's my issue with where I was at with Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. My problem is we don't need redeemable villains in every freaking story. I promise you, we really just do not. It's the idea of all it takes is one bad day. There's been a lot of discourse about that over the years. Like the one I can really think about is Daredevil season 2, I believe, where the Punisher and Daredevil are talking about it and how they're the same. And Daredevil's like, no, we're not the same. And the Punisher basically just like, oh no, we are the same. You just haven't had a day bad enough to get you to where I am at. And that's the thing, is, here's how I put it. I get the idea of the redeemability because it makes them relatable. And maybe that's what she was saying, the relatable villain, not the redeemable villain. The relatable villain is someone that, if we were put in the same situation, we could technically become them. And so overall, we agree with their sentiment. Punisher, Thanos, hell, even Scarlet Witch. I'm using a lot of comic book characters right now, but you get the idea. But I don't always agree with that trope in writing. Now, don't get me wrong. I completely understand. My name is Upcoming Author. I am not actually on Susan Collins' level. Okay? So, but at the same time, everyone has one strict rule to follow when they're writing, and that is write what you want to read. And I get it. There are a lot of people out there who have made some terrible choices in their lives, and it's kind of feeding into their writing, or they have people in their lives who made terrible choices, and so they're trying to make sure people understand that we get it. Sometimes it's just very hard to do the right thing. So overall, what I'm trying to say is, though, it didn't show it really here. Spoilers, obviously, for the book. If you're still here listening, I'm assuming you read it, so here's my thoughts. Suzanne spends the whole entire book showing us that he doesn't necessarily agree, he has PTSD, that he is a part of his environment, which is that mentality that the capital's better, people in the district are basically animals, blah, 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 right? So don't get me wrong, he's not completely redeemable, but at the same time, we have to ask the question, is he just a product of his environment? Because would we not all be the same? Like, the biggest thing I really like is the difference between Sejanus and Coriolanus, because it's a battle between nature versus nurture. And the question basically becomes, when does your nurture become your nature? And when you're nurtured in such a way that it becomes your nature, does that technically make it okay? Again, I understand. I am a black man living in America. I absolutely understand that some of those mindsets are not okay. But can we fully blame Coriolanus for what he is? So my arguments to my sister was, because I love reading stories and trying to figure it out before it gets to the ending. Some of them were, one was he was going to have the one bad day, which happened. Another one was that Dr. Gall was grooming him, and then between his grooming, that was going to lead into President Snow. That happened. And then my other thing was it wouldn't happen until the ending of the book. And that most certainly happened. Don't give me 500 pages to read, and then you don't make the prequel story about the bad guy make sense until the ending. Come on now. That being said, I absolutely enjoyed this book. This book was really good. Like, it's very well written. I love how Susan writes. Don't get me wrong. I love this book, and I'm excited to see the movie. I am a little concerned that the movie's not going to hit all the highlights, because I didn't feel like there was anything wasted in this book. And to try to put this 500-page book into a 2.5-hour movie, I don't want to be disappointed. But I was right. Didn't happen to the end. He was groomed, and he had his one bad day. So, obviously, his one bad day is the crap that went down between him and Lucy Gray. He slipped up. He mentioned killing 3 people. Then he had the guns. He came out with the gun in his hand, and then at that point, his baser instincts took control, which, at the end of the day, technically makes the capital right. Coriolanus was just a boy that wanted to make sure he had some semblance of peace. And he argues that as well. Near the end of the book, he and Lucy Gray actually have some pretty good conversations about how he viewed the capital, what he stood for, why he didn't agree with everything. The argument on there are good people on both sides, but overall, I don't necessarily blame him.